Happy Monday and welcome to Charting with Dan. Dan, Murrell, it's been a while since we've talked about box office.
It is. Well, we had to go see Justice League last week, which meant that we could not do the charting, which this week is about Justice League.
Big news in Justice League news, right? Like this box office, it's an interesting piece of box office history in the sense that something that sounds like a massive number actually in many respects is not.
It just goes to show you how we adjust expectations based on inflation and everything. Yeah, let's take a look at the top five. Justice League, they were saying, was tracking to come in between 110 and 120 million dollars, and the final numbers today were even below the revised downward estimates of Warner Brothers, coming in at 93 million, almost 94 million dollars. We'll put that in perspective in just a minute, but this is significantly below what Warner Brothers expected, what they thought the movie was tracking at. This is a movie with an estimated budget of $300 million. That is twice Wonder Woman's budget. It opened below Wonder Woman. A lot of the reporting has been that it is already it's weird to talk about this, but some people are reporting that despite the fact they don't make $93 million, that it is already a quote unquote a box office bomb. I don't know about that. We'll take a look at a few other things that kind of give me some pause. One of the things that I'm not quite sold on for Justice League being a failure, which again is weird, but you put them in these big terms, I guess. It has the advantage of the Thanksgiving weekend.
Yes.
Which a lot of other movies, even during the summer, you have more competition, I think, and other more, blockbusters that have opened prior to it. Justice League has the Thanksgiving weekend to play, and I believe, people have been saying they've been kind of tracking it along the Batman v Superman Suicide Squad line. I think what they're not accounting for is Justice League, I think, has better word of mouth than either Batman v Superman or Suicide Squad generally. I think from a general audience, I think it has better word of mouth than those two movies. So I think it's actually going to hold up fairly well this weekend, I think.
It doesn't have a ton. There's a couple of things. I think it does have good word of mouth among the core fan base. It's got a B+ cinema score, which is not bad at all.
It's not bad. I mean, they would have preferred an A or an A-,
Sure,
but B+ it's all right.
That's not bad. And then it's got 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. We can talk about what that does or does not mean, or how that did or did not impact things, perhaps. Sure. And it doesn't have massive competition this weekend. Disney's Coco/Pixar's Coco is going to come out this weekend, which is a delightful film. However, it will not necessarily, those audiences won't necessarily.
It's not the exact same target market. There's some concentric circles that overlap, but it's not as if, I think one thing that people are really going to look at with this result as one of the factors is there have never been two major superhero movies in that we have an MCU movie and Thor opening 2 weeks ago, Justice League opening 2 weeks after, and I think people are going to say, was there a crossover there? Because two superhero movies of that caliber have never opened that close to each other.
Right. And
was there cannibalizing there?
Was there? And then also, I think the big story is going to be, and we'll talk about this in a minute, what the drop-off is, I think, will be the most revealing thing. Do we want to talk about other things in the top five?
Well, before we talk about it, because there's bad news for Justice League and there's good news for Justice League, but let's talk about the rest of the top five. Wonder surprised people maybe more than Justice League as far as what it was expected to do versus what it did. 27, almost $28 million. That is a huge number, way bigger than what anybody anticipated for that movie. A+ cinema score. That is almost unheard of. That actually boding going into the Thanksgiving family weekend for a movie with an A+ cinema score, that bodes very well for that movie to have legs to grow. This could be one of those sneaky little movies. Maybe not a lot of hype going in, but it could be a word of mouth movie, especially with the response that we've seen. You could really see that balloon going into the holiday weekend. That could be a sleeper hit that not a whole lot of people saw coming.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one in that it does actually have big names attached to it.
It does.
It's got a core. We don't actually see a lot of movies like this right now. That it's just sort of got a nice core, kind message to it, and I think maybe this demonstrates a hunger for. I mean, that's the whole campaign for the film.
Choose kind.
Choose kind.
And I think a lot of people might have stayed away because even when I saw the first trailers, I was a little hesitant because it looked like a movie that could go
either way.
Either way, it could be a really heartwarming story, or it could be what I like to affectionately call a pay it forward situation, where it's treacly, manipulative. Just doesn't work in any way, shape, or form. This looks like a movie that has connected very well to audiences, and I think that it's going to have lots of legs going forward. So Wonder is one to see how far can that movie go. And then the rest were holdovers. Thor Ragnarok in third place, Murder on the Orient Express, Daddy's Home 2, the releases from last week. So
let's take a look at Justice League as compared to the rest of the DC.
So let's get to the bad
universe.
news for Justice League, which are the domestic numbers, the U.S. domestic numbers. This is where they are able to take, the studios are able to take the biggest chunk of the box office. That's why we focus on it. Plus, any number of reasons. Obviously, we're based in the U.S., but also, this is where a lot of people look to first for a movie's success. The news isn't great for Justice League. Let's look as far as the DC universe, their domestic opening weekends. Batman v Superman still ruling the roost. Justice League, the only DCU movie, and I'm saying DCU because DCEU, they said it wasn't a thing. So I'm going to say DC Universe movie, the only one not to break $100 million. If you would have told me at the beginning of this year that Justice League would open $10 million below Wonder Woman, a movie that I didn't even know was going to be a box office success, I would have told you were crazy. Justice League, this is not the result that Warner Brothers wants, obviously. They don't want the movie, their Avengers type movie, and that this is the movie that everything's supposed to be building toward to open at the bottom of their other movies. That's not the pattern that you want. There was a lot of talk about Warner Brothers holding up things to see what happens with Justice League. Flashpoint, Wonder Woman 2, obviously we know is definitely going to happen. It's still, it was the biggest movie of the summer. It's over $800 million worldwide. That movie's obviously going to happen. But Flashpoint, what happens with Cyborg? Do they do Green Lantern? Do they not do Green Lantern? What happens with Man of Steel? What happens with Ben Affleck and Batman and Matt Reeves' movie? A lot of that, people were saying it depends on what happens with Justice League. Are we going to see more of a focus on rebooting?
Yeah, and it's also, then they've also had sort of the Joker origin story movie. We've got Suicide Squad 2 in the works. There's so many things that are pending. My guess, Flashpoint is the opportunity basically to reboot, right? Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if they move forward with that, if they can find the right way to do it. And I think fans would love it. And if you can find the right, in terms of that's just a great storyline.
Right.
And if you can find the right way to do it. However, I wonder if the story and the lesson that we're really learning is that, focus on a story, develop that story, make a great movie, focus on that character, and people will go see it. And this isn't to say that Justice League is a failure, because it's not, and we still don't know what it'll do. Wonder Woman grew and grew and grew over time. Well,
there was some conventional wisdom that I think, if you look at the two DC movies this year combined, I think there's some conventional wisdom that's kind of gone out the window. One of those is you're only as good as your last movie. I think that both of these movies have flip-flopped it both ways. A lot of people said, including myself, because there was some negativity surrounding Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad, that the box office for Wonder Woman would be depressed because people just weren't on the DC train anymore. Yeah. Well, it was the #1 movie of the summer, so obviously that's wrong. Conversely, people were saying oh my God, everyone loved Wonder Woman. That's great for Justice League. It's going to soar even higher because of the Wonder Woman effect. That didn't happen either. So this idea of that every movie is interconnected with the performance of your last movie, I think, at least for this franchise, is out the window. And I think that Warner Brothers now knows that fans are looking at these movies one by one, individually. You don't necessarily have to bank on what the previous movie did. I think that's going to work in their favor. The other thing, I think it really, you were talking about it, it's just fundamentals. I honestly think Justice League had kind of a lackluster marketing campaign. Wonder Woman, Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, Man of Steel, I think they had great trailers, they had great marketing materials, they had great billboards, they had great posters. I didn't think Justice League had any of those. Part of that is necessity. There's always going to be an element of Justice League that people will, the what if factor, people are already second guessing it. That was Joss Whedon. That's Joss Whedon's fault. I wanted to see what Zack Snyder did. He didn't do that. He did that. I want to see that. People are going to be second guessing this thing to tomorrow, and that, I'm not so much behind. I'm not on board with that. I think that what happened with Zack Snyder and the circumstances of him stepping away transcends whether you liked the Justice League or not. And I hate the fact that everyone is already second guessing and blaming Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
this is not like Zack Snyder was fired.
Right, yeah.
And Joss Whedon was, it's not a solo situation where, your original director was fired and you brought in a replacement director. So I think there's so many X factors surrounding Justice League, but the main one is maybe it just wasn't marketed well.
I mean, it's interesting because the Warner Brothers usually does such an excellent job of marketing.
Yeah.
And it did feel, and I'm curious what the budgets were, right? What was the marketing budget for each of these films,
right.
Respectively? Because I wonder if they just didn't, it was already reported to have a budget of $300 million, a production budget of $300 million.
Right.
And so at that point, if they are in a phase where they're unclear where they're going to go next, do they want to, sometimes there's more money spent on marketing than the film. Not often when you're talking already about a $300 million. But I mean, maybe at that point they were a little more cautious about the marketing than they had been in the past. I'm not sure, because we would really have to trace, did they blitz? Where did they target? What were they trying to do?
So many different things. I mean, for me, it was just a trailer issue. The trailers I didn't think were extraordinarily engaging, and I thought particularly the billboards and other material just didn't seem as strong as the other movies.
What's interesting about the billboards for me is that I sort of got the idea, but I don't know that it fully played. If you don't know what those logos mean, and if you have no attachment to them, that looks like gibberish to you.
Yeah.
If you are the average moviegoer, that doesn't make sense to you necessarily.
Yeah.
Which I thought was an odd choice.
Let's look at the final bad news. Then we get to the good news for Justice League. Putting it into perspective of opening weekends for just comic book movies in general this year, Guardians 2 still number one, Thor, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, then Justice League again in the 5th spot. 5 years ago, let's go back to 5 years ago when Man of Steel came out. If you would have told me that Justice League would have opened below not only Wonder Woman, but another Spider-Man movie, and then the 3rd Thor movie and Guardians of the Galaxy, like, are you kidding me? It just, when people talk about established properties, it goes to show you how far a property and how quickly a property can go from unknown to established.
Known,
in 3 years, Guardians went from, I've never heard of these guys, what is this, to biggest opening for a comic book movie of the year. But let's look at the good news for Justice League. We've talked so much about blockbusters being saved by foreign box office, by international box office. While Justice League may have had the 5th best opening for a domestic DC movie, it actually was the 2nd best global opening. Now, this opened day and date and just about every country worldwide. Still, yes, very far behind Batman v Superman, but it made $185 million international. That's not counting the U.S. box office. This is just foreign countries. It opened in China. It opened just about everywhere. Suicide Squad in 3rd. It should be noted, Suicide Squad did not open in China at all due to their supernatural elements. Wonder Woman, it opened $60 million more than Wonder Woman in an international market. So internationally, it's off to a better start than Wonder Woman, if not domestically. Again, not saying that it's going to be a massive hit. But I think that a lot of people are burying this movie pretty early when it's still a possibility that it could at least break even for the studio.
Oh, yeah, I think
but it's not the success I think that they would have wanted it to be.
Yeah, certainly. And I wonder, I do wonder at what, if they know internally what the number is where they say, if it doesn't get above this number, reboot. Because reportedly when Batman v Superman was coming out, they said if it doesn't get above $1 billion or above,
yeah,
it's a failure.
Which it did. Yeah. So, yeah.
So Justice League, I'm wondering what that number is.
Yeah, I've heard some people throw the $1 billion number out. I've seen. I know that I think Forbes was trying to track it today, do the math, but there's so many X factors that it's hard to do. Some people saying 800, 900 million, $1 billion. We'll see. It all just depends on how it does in the coming weeks. There's a big Death Star on the horizon that's going to suck up every box office dollar in about a month.
Yeah.
So I think that's about the time frame that Justice League has to work with.
We don't think there's actually going to be a Death Star in Jedi.
Oh God, I hope not.
think there
Let's look at the top per screen. Justice League actually does win top per screen this week. It barely beat out last week's per screen winner, which you didn't get a chance to talk about. Martin McDonagh's new movie, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. That was about $20,000 a screen. It had $80,000 a screen last week. I saw it yesterday. I love. He's done Seven Psychopaths, which I know you love.
I love.
In Bruges, which I love.
I love In Bruges too. It's just Seven Psychopaths was the movie that a lot of people didn't love, and I absolutely do. I think it's brilliant, layered commentary, satire. If you guys haven't seen these films, you should.
You should, and I'm gonna campaign hard. Everyone's been campaigning for Frances McDormand for Best Actress for this movie, 3 Billboards, which they should. I want to campaign for Sam Rockwell for Best Supporting Actor for this movie because he deserves it. He is fantastic in this movie. Frances McDormand is fantastic. It's a great cast. It is a dark movie. If you don't know Martin McDonagh's work,
check it out.
It is dark. But check out 3 Billboards.
It's dark, but it's also darkly comedic.
Very darkly comedic. Yeah,
you'll laugh. You'll
laugh.
Just feel bad about yourself.
You'll feel bad about laughing. Exactly. The domestic chart since last week, Thor Ragnarok jumped into the top 10, bumping off Batman. Lego Batman falls off of the domestic chart. That's going to jump over to Despicable Me 3 probably next week. Settle in, maybe below it, above it, depends on how much more money it makes. Will Justice League make that chart? 188 million. I think, barring the absolute bottom dropping out of Justice League, I think it'll probably make it to that 10 spot and bump Dunkirk off. For it to not, to leg out less than two times what it made in its opening weekend, like that would be disastrous. I don't think that's going to happen. I actually think it's going to hold up pretty well this weekend. So I think Justice League is on its way up to the top 10 chart so we can get bumped off by Star Wars.
Let's look at the world.
Let's look at the international chart. Thor Ragnarok jumped onto that chart, bumped another superhero off. He bumps Batman off the domestic chart. He bumps Logan off the worldwide chart. It drops down a spot. Thor Ragnarok now the number 9 movie of the year. It's probably going to jump over Pirates. It may jump over Wonder Woman. We'll see. Thor, not a franchise that a lot of people expected to be as ascendant, I think, as some of the other ones, but doing really well.
So here's another thing that people have been talking about in terms of Justice League, and this is the question that I feel like has circled and circled and circled again over the last 10 years and will continue to until it no longer does, which is it comic book movie fatigue? Well, at the end of the day, we're probably going to look at 5 out of the top 10 worldwide box office hits will be comic book movies, so probably not.
Probably not.
Right.
Yeah. Speaking of international, to wrap up, we mentioned that Coco comes out this week, the newest from Pixar. We're going to have a review for it later this week.
It's delightful.
It is delightful.
Spoiler.
And it's already setting box office records. It came out actually 2 or 3 weeks ago in Mexico, and it is already the highest grossing movie in Mexico in local currency. The peso, there's an international rate. It hasn't made as much in dollars as a lot of the other movies, but when you in local currency in pesos, Coco already the most successful movie in Mexico, and I think this is a movie that is going to have great word of mouth.
Oh yeah.
And it opens, I believe, on Wednesday to get ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday, which of course we will cover the entire 5-day Thanksgiving holiday and the weekend box office next week. But how much of a bite is Coco going to take out of the Justice League? I mean, it is already a phenomenon in Mexico. We'll see how it does here in the U.S. But Coco is a great family film. It's going to take a big chunk of the family dollar, I think, for the Thanksgiving weekend. What's left for Justice League?
I'm curious about that because the other thing that we have to remember about Coco, besides that, it's going to, I agree, this is a great movie. This is a great one from Pixar. It's going to have wonderful word of mouth. The critics are really loving it. It's also got the Olaf's Frozen adventure in front of it.
It's true.
And that, I think, could even drive it that much more.
We didn't see that.
Yeah, we didn't see that.
We don't know about Olaf.
They're trying to make us pay the ticket.
to go see Olaf.
To go see Olaf.
We didn't see Olaf.
Didn't see that one. However, it's there. And so I feel like when you add that in, you're really talking about a fiercer even fiercer competition in the sense that Coco for now is an unknown property, right? It's an original, which is wonderful. And I think that's why they put the Frozen Adventure in front of it, because they wanted to put a known property in front of it to get people in the theater and then watch this wonderful film.
What I love about Coco doing so well in Mexico is, because it is a story that is so steeped in Mexican culture, I think it's just an indication of how much that movie is speaking to people, particularly when it is steeped in Mexican culture. And I think a lot of that meaning and significance is going to translate to audiences here. And we'll see, Cars 3 was a bit of a disappointment for Pixar box office-wise this summer. Did not do as well as they hoped that they would. Is Coco going to be the surprise smash for Pixar this year?
So.
Are they going to flip the script, and instead of the summer movie is it going to be in the fall?
I hope so.
See. I hope so too. It deserves it. It's way better than Cars 3.
Way better.
Yeah.
Not that, it's just good.
Yeah.
It's very good.
It's a lot better.
It's better.
It's better.
It's just a better movie.
It's a better movie.
It's been good talking to box office with you.
All sorts of numbers.
So many numbers and charts. Thank you guys for joining us today. Let us know what your predictions are for this next weekend's box office coming up in the comments below. That's a fun game we could start.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So much fun. I will not patrol that, though. We'll have to get someone to...
We'll have to get another person to do that.
Another person to do that.
Yeah. We don't have staff. Good. Thank you for joining us.
Yep. I'm Dan
Cornet.
Murrell. Thanks for watching.